Today I have something really special that I'd like to show off to you guys. These are the WAFO Espresso Baskets. In this video, I'd like to cover my relationship with WAFO. What am I doing for them? These baskets, what do each of these baskets do in terms of flavor, some performance numbers, and who are they actually targeted for, as well as we'll talk a bit about pricing and availability. WAFO Espresso, like waffle, WAFO. WAFO Espresso is a company in Taiwan that is making some incredibly unique products, mainly these very, very crazy looking espresso baskets. And these, I think, are going to be the future trend of espresso, especially maybe in something like the professional market. But I actually think these are going to be really interesting for something like home users, home enthusiasts, which is why I'm making this video, because I think many of you might be very interested in these. So let me disclose my relationship with WAFO. I'm currently doing some consulting work for them, basically helping them with marketing and global launch strategy. Currently, these are launched in Taiwan for the professional market, for coffee shops. And I think you'll see soon enough why that makes a ton of sense. These are this new trend of baskets where you make a basket that has holes that go all the way to the edge, and you add a ton of holes. So if you have a lot of holes, you can actually do a ton of craziness with espresso extractions. Mainly, your extraction is generally going to be insanely even. Let me go over each of the baskets, and then we'll spend a bit of time actually talking about the SOE Spirit basket, because I think this basket is the most interesting basket that would probably suit many, many coffee shops, as well as some of you guys at home. So there are 4 different baskets. We have the Blend 4-Step, Blend Original, Single Origin Espresso Spirit, and Single Origin Espresso Classic. So 4 different baskets, but really kind of 2 types of baskets. We have a blend basket and we have a single origin basket. And really, you can use whatever coffee you want in these, but they do offer differences when it comes to taste as well as extraction yield numbers. Let's go ahead and open these up. So they come in these really cute little boxes that have QR codes on here to bring you to their Instagram and website and Facebook. And they also have a QR code on the basket themselves that will bring you to the Instagram, but you can open it up like this. These baskets are made of stainless steel and they're CNC. They are hefty. These baskets are insanely hefty. For example, if I take one of these decent baskets or an IMS or VST, you can actually flex these with your hands. You can take your basket and actually flex them. You cannot flex these baskets at all. So they're built so nicely. They're also significantly heavier. But the baskets that have 3,000 holes, like the SOE Spirit and SOE Classic, are going to be of most interest to, I think, many of you. If you have holes that go all the way to the edges, that means your extraction can be insanely even. That means you can push much faster flow rates. It's basically the same thing as if you take a bottom paper filter and you stick it into something like a VST, IMS, Decent, Pullman, is that this allows you to get a more even extraction. And we are actually observing a much more even extraction across the board with these baskets that have 3,000 holes. And spoiler alert, it eliminates the need to use a bottom paper filter to achieve the same results. By extending the holes all the way out to the edges, you do get that massive flow rate, but your espresso is not going to pull into the center anymore. You're going to get kind of these rain droplets or pockets of espresso, but when you knock out that espresso puck, it is going to be insanely even. We'll actually spend a fair bit of time talking about the Spirit basket, because this is what my friend Caffeinated.science spent a bit of time helping me do some measurements of this, and well, this is also my favorite basket. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pull a shot. I have no bottom paper filter and no puck screen because you don't need them with these, which is really, really cool. So go ahead and pull a shot here. This is going to be really, really fun. When you're pulling a shot with these baskets that have like 3K holes, you're gonna really want to make sure that you have a big cup, or you bring things closer, or you maybe even use a spatted portafilter. But look at this. Pulling the Turbo Bloom profile, by the way. glorious extraction evenness, actually. But yeah, that's kind of, at least at this angle, you might look at it and be like, whoa, that looks wild. And yeah, this was a shot that pulled in 17 seconds. I'm actually grinding really fine for this. But let me actually now knock this puck out, and then you'll see some things, and we'll talk about some basket things. All right, let's knock this puck out. That is hilarious. It is so evenly extracted. You look at this puck and you see no black spots in it at all. And that's the SOE Spirit basket, which I think is the most interesting basket for a lot of folks. And that's because you have holes that go all the way out to the edges, and you have so many holes. So what you saw there is the coffee doesn't really kind of pull into the center like a traditional basket. It actually kind of has multiple streams, and then sometimes it will pull into the center. But basically, yeah, visuals don't really matter with these. What you should care about is, what does the puck actually look like? And these are things that you can actually measure as well as taste. The single origin espresso spirit and the single origin espresso classic. These are baskets that have, one has lines and one has holes. To be honest, between these two baskets, I cannot really tell that big of a difference between lines and holes, but I haven't done insane extensive testing. What I can tell you is these baskets that have holes that go all the way to the edges eliminate the need to use a bottom paper filter. So the coolest thing about these SOE baskets is the fact that they give you basically the same results of if you used a bottom paper filter on these fancier baskets like the Pullman or these decent VST baskets, is that because the holes go all the way to the edges, your extraction is insanely even. And that also means you can do a few different things. That means that you can have an easier workflow. You don't need to use that bottom paper filter, but it also means that you can grind way finer. For example, if you don't use a bottom paper filter and you just pull this versus this, these are generally flowing about 1 milliliter faster. So that's way finer grind. The other thing too is you can look at this from an extraction yield standpoint. And I'll cut in here is I'll tell you a bit about Caffeinated.science's observations about extraction yield with the SOE Spirit versus a Pullman basket. So we're doing some quick little cuts in here to show you some WAFO extraction tests by Shay. Check out his blog, Caffeinated.science. But let's go ahead and look through this. So this is basically an interesting comparison between the SOE Spirit and Pullman. This is the Pullman basket with no bottom paper filter, by the way, just to clarify. So what Shay did is he did a ton of tests. He used a Shay Worka site, which is an Ethiopian landrace coffee. And he basically pulled a ton of shots on his Lagom P100 with the 2015 or pre-2015 SSP Caspers. So basically, the bottom here is going to be the grind size he's using. Here is the shot time, and then we're going to go into kind of the extraction yield numbers. So this is, I think, the most interesting thing here is, so our X is grind size and our Y is extraction yield. So at various grind sizes, and we'll dive into this, we see that the WAFO pretty much always extracts much higher. And that's because even, out here, right, like we have very similar numbers, but that's because the grind is so coarse that we're not really doing anything with the basket there. We're extracting like insanely evenly here because the grind is so coarse. But as we tighten up the grind, you'll notice that we suddenly see a almost 2%, 1.5 to 2% extraction yield increase with the Spirit, and until you hit diminishing returns land here. And when you're in this area, that's usually so fine that the center of the puck is channeling. So here is the interesting thing. At this peak, the highest extraction yield here, the Spirit is extracting like that's like 27%. That's so high. When we look at some of the visuals, right, like yes, as we go finer, we increase the extraction yield until we hit uneven extraction. There's a really great article from Shay on this. Please check this out as well. But basically, if you look at the puck visuals, when you're in this area here, you will see dark spots in the center of your puck. So it's very, very fine that you're creating channels. Now, this is the really interesting thing here is when we look at the visuals of the pucks themselves, is with traditional baskets, even things like the Pullman, even at the most optimal extraction, highest extraction yield, because you don't have a bottom paper filter, or because the holes don't go all the way to the edge like the WAFO does, you get the black spots. And these black spots are uneven extraction, under extraction. Whereas you get this clean, beautiful looking puck, and you get 2.5% higher extraction yield, which is quite insane. So this also means that you can grind finer. The flow rates of these shots are very interesting. So, this is like the really interesting thing is if you pull the exact same grind setting and you prep the exact same way, just look at how much more, how much finer you can grind. But look at the flow rate differences. So on the decent basket is even a bigger difference. I think in the video I say like, oh, it's 1 mil per second. It's actually around 2 mils. I just double checked. And your extraction yield is going to be higher. I mean, look, so with basically like 1-ish% higher. But this is the really cool thing is if you wanted to achieve the same exact style of shot in terms of shot time, or say you have everything calibrated to that, you have so much more room to play here. If you wanted to make these flow rate graphs match up on the WAFO, you can grind even finer. So that's the kind of really, really interesting thing with this WAFO basket. Now, these are some other taste notes that Shay wanted to add, which I basically totally agree with everything that he says here. Essentially, the WAFO SOE Spirit is just so good at fruit quality. So, as Shay says, like you can definitely pick out this. I agree with him. And then when you do the WAFO with or without the bond paper filter, it's basically the same, which is kind of crazy because the holes are so much smaller on the WAFO. So you don't get any fines into the cup, and they basically taste the same. And then in my experience, the WAFO and the decent and Pullman basket, when you use that bond paper filter, very, very similar in terms of taste, which is that higher clarity, better fruit quality, less harshness, really. It's really like the harshness in the finish and the presentation of acidity that I think is the biggest benefit of the Spirit here. So that's kind of the really cool thing about the SOE Spirit, and I think that's why this basket is quite interesting for most folks, or you guys should totally consider it. But yeah, definitely want to thank our good friend Shay for putting this all together. Between the SOE Spirit and the SOE Classic, the biggest differences that you will find using these baskets compared to a normal basket is actually the clarity and fruit quality. Or really, it's kind of like if you've ever done bottom paper filter and you've seen how fast you can push flow rate as well as extraction yield, that's really the biggest taste difference. So fruit quality is going to go way, way up. On these baskets, like the fruit can be very clear, but to me, it's like stewed fruit. But on this, it's like fresh fruit, which is kind of the simplest way I can explain things. But generally speaking, 1 milliliter per second flow rate increase and 1% extraction yield increase and a much more even extraction. And you don't need to use any of these filters or puck screens or anything like that. And your prep also can be a little less good, and I think it's because the edges extract so much more evenly, is that like you can do some really like egregious puck prep and still get pretty decent results. So that means that if you are trying to achieve the same shot between these two baskets, say for example you wanted a higher pressure shot or anything like that, you can grind even finer with the WAFO SOE baskets, and that gives you just a higher extraction. I think this really matters more for the professional market, is that you can now have a basket that extracts your single origin espressos very, very well with not the most amount of time when it comes to prep. You can actually just tamp directly in here and still get a pretty great result. You know, it's kind of like weird to say that, but that's kind of what I've experienced too, is that my prep doesn't have to be super perfect when the holes go all the way to the edges, and I'm always getting just such a tasty espresso out of this, and it's just giving me clarity. It's giving me a great understanding of the coffee. This is the opposite to that, the blend baskets. These blend baskets that actually intentionally extract lower. They intentionally block off holes. And this is really a very unique basket design. I've never seen it until now. Is let's take the 3,000 holes and turn it to about 1,500 holes. So now let's pull the exact same shot, profile and everything, using the blend basket. It's like rain. This one is always so fun to look at when it's pulling. Our flow rate actually is quite similar between this shot and the last shot, but actually our peak pressure kind of goes up, and we visually see a lot more crema with these blend shots. And actually when I knock this puck out, we'll see that it's actually not evenly extracted. It's extracted lower. I mean, because on these baskets you're actually like kind of blocking things, you're creating this uneven extraction. And I think that's because, and that's what causes kind of actually more pressure within the puck to actually give us more crema, but we do actually see slightly higher pressures. So this is the blend basket, which is super wild when we actually knock the puck out. You actually will see uneven extraction. So this is a bit really hard to see on camera, but I'll throw it on screen. And of course the decent doesn't create the driest pucks in the world, but what you'll see is because there's actually kind of a blind spot on the inside here that blocks the flow, you get uneven extraction. You're not extracting there. And that actually creates these black rings, and it changes the way your coffee tastes. So the blend baskets are kind of this opposite to the SOE baskets, where what happens with the 4 steps and the origin basket to me is the 4 steps tones down a lot of the intensity that you get in a light roast espresso. So if you've ever drank like an espresso and you're like, oh my God, this is way too intense, like very, very acidic presentation of a coffee, or maybe it's a very acidic coffee, these blend baskets actually really add kind of this sharp drop-off when it comes to fruit presentation or acidity presentation. Specifically with the blend 4 steps, is it seems to also highlight bitterness, which is something that you might be wondering, like, why would you ever want to do that? And I actually think this would work really well if you wanted to make single origin espresso milk drinks, where you can now have like a milk drink that's kind of balanced, that has clarity. The way that Shay has described this, and the way that I also describe these, is these blend baskets are like a 4K image. They're high resolution but blurred, and you get that in terms of like this acidity presentation. It's not such a painful acidity presentation. It gets rounded off and the drop off is very, very fast. Kind of similar to some burst sets, and that's also a point of discussion that we'll have as well. So basically these 4 different baskets offer you a variety of ways to present espresso. And these SOE baskets work fantastic if you're just drinking straight espressos. And if you're doing milk-based drinks, you may want to consider using the blend drinks of creating an espresso that has a lot of balance that would work very well in a milk-based drink where you don't have a searingly clear espresso that cuts through your milk. So now let's talk about the applications of these baskets. I mean, you know, who are these for? What can you do with them, right? Obviously, we have 4 kind of different ways, or really I would argue 2 different ways of how you can present espressos, 2 very distinctive styles of espresso that you can present. And what does this allow you to do as the end user? So if you're a professional coffee shop, I think what the interesting thing that you can do is if you have a multiple group machine, you can start using specific baskets with certain grinders, maybe for single origin espressos, or for your milk-based drinks. I imagine using the SOE Spirit for those very expensive espressos that you want to serve, that you want to ensure are extracted evenly, that taste the best, that represent the coffee best. Use one group for that. And for the other groups, if you're banging out milk-based drinks, use these blend baskets. You have one group for milk, one group for espresso, and so on and so forth. And it's very, very interesting. So I think that's like a very obvious recommendation for coffee shops. There's some kind of interesting things that these baskets allow you to do, especially if you're a home enthusiast, which is really have a ton of fun with how fine of a grind you can push. How far can you push extraction yield? That's one big one that I think a lot of folks would be interested with the SOE Spirit. But really, there's kind of this other side of this discussion, which is these baskets do something very similar to a burr swap. It's like you can have one grinder that has 4 different presentations of a coffee, or 2 very distinctive presentations. And it's kind of crazy now, which is like you can now take lower end grinders, cheaper grinders, and you can push that more even extraction. You can push that higher extraction. Or if you have a grinder that is already very, very high extracting, you can tone that intensity down for something like a milk-based drink. So it's really flexibility that you get when you have a variety of baskets that do different things to your coffee, right? I feel like that's a very obvious thing to say. And I'm speaking very broadly too. I mean, if we were to get into the nitty-gritty, these baskets also handle slow and fast flow rates very, very differently. Each of them in the different patterns present even more options as well. So when really like the biggest differences are going to be the SOE Spirit and the blend 4 steps. Is if you taste these 2 espressos side by side, you probably would be like, this is from a completely different grinder. I'm tasting 2 completely different pieces of equipment. But really what you're tasting, and if you dial into the same exact flow rate, you're tasting the baskets and you're getting different extraction yield values there. These are just another layer of control. So I think if you're, say, in a household and you have one grinder and you're using it for milk-based drinks, you just do a basket swap and you now have a espresso that I think is much more suitable for milk. And if you're drinking just straight espresso, swap to a basket that has 3,000 holes. So anyway, it's a lot of fun to swap between baskets and just play around with what do each of these baskets do to your coffees, and especially when you mix them in milk and all of that. It's another layer of control that you have in manipulating how your drinks taste. Now, you might be wondering, what is pricing and availability? These are targeted to the professional market. So each of these baskets is $200 US. 200 bucks for a basket. It is CNC'd metal. For those of you who are in the know with how expensive it is to produce one of these, I actually think it's pretty reasonable, especially when you consider how many holes are in one of these and how solid these baskets are. So really for some of these professional shops, I think this makes complete sense. I mean, this is a basket that's not gonna flex, it's a basket that's gonna last forever, and it's just another tool that you have to change how things taste. So for home use, I actually think what makes the most sense is to get one basket. Just get a basket that is very different to whatever basket you're currently using, because these are expensive. 200 bucks for a basket is very pricey. I think the basket that I would really recommend for folks is this SOE Spirit basket, because it's a basket that lets you grind so much finer and have such a crazy forgiving experience when you pull espressos. This is just going to be kind of a very polarizing basket to use, very different than a traditional precision basket. And for some of these blend baskets, I guess if you really wanted to invest in having a dedicated basket for milk drinks, I feel like this would be a very unique basket to use for milk. Now let's talk about availability. So availability of these is going to be 2023 onward. They don't want to launch outside of Taiwan until then. But if you happen to be in Taiwan, you can go to Taiwan International Coffee Show and you can go to their booth and try everything and see if your opinion matches up with mine. But aside from that, 2023 is when they're going to be launching these baskets, and that's kind of what I'm helping them out with. So I would love if you guys have any suggestions, or, I think like most home guys, people who are watching my channel, watching these videos, are going to be interested in just getting one of these. I don't know how feasible it is to buy all 4, and if you're a professional coffee shop, I think maybe you would want a set. It would be interesting to try out, but so far I think the interesting things with these baskets are to get very different tasting baskets, which is going to be something like the Spirit and the Blend 4-step basket. But overall, these are the WAFO Espresso baskets. I wanted to just kind of do this introduction to you guys. Is like, this is, I think, going to be the next big thing when it comes to espresso. And it's interesting to see that it's a company from Taiwan that came out with it. And I'm really happy to be doing a little bit of work for them and helping them out. If you have any questions, please let me know. Please check out their Instagram, Facebook, webpage, their email as well, because there's a lot of really cool stuff coming out of this company, and there's more to come. But otherwise, thank you so much for spending the time to watch this video. I'll see you guys around.